The movie begins on a particular Friday in a Los Angeles neighborhood, where a young man named Craig wakes up to answer the door before slamming it closed again once he sees it's the Jehovah's Preachers. He then comes to his sister Dana's room to wake her up before going to the kitchen. He pours cereal in a bowl but finds out that they're out of milk.
Ain't nothing in this house.
And while he muttered his annoyance, his father, Mr. Jones, hears it. Mr. Jones goes on a rant about how Craig keeps eating all of the food in the house. He tells Craig to eat the cereal as is, but only after he throws out the trash. After throwing out the trash, Craig returns home to his mother, Mrs. Jones, cooking breakfast. However, Mr. Jones calls him to the bathroom while he takes a dump, only to berate Craig for getting fired from his job yesterday. He urges his son to learn to become a dog catcher just like he is, but Craig doesn't want to. So, Mr. Jones gives him an ultimatum to find a job or get kicked out of the house.
You ain't gotta worry about catching a dog. You gotta worry about a dog catching your ass.
Later, Craig gets a phone call from his girlfriend, Joy, who accuses him of going to the movies with another girl last night. He denies it and hangs up before joining his mother at the dining table. When Mr. Jones prepares to leave for work, he tells Craig to go look for a job today. In Craig's bedroom, his best friend Smokey shows up at his window and asks him to hang out outside. While Craig gets ready, Smokey approaches a man in a nice car named Big Worm. Big Worm suspects that Smokey has been smoking the stash of weed that he's supposed to sell for Big Worm.
You smoking my shit?
Hell no. With your shit? Hell no.
You smoking my shit?
Smokey denies it, even though he did do it, and Big Worm warns that he will beat Smokey up if he catches Smokey doing it. Afterwards, Craig tells Smokey about how he got fired because his supervisor supposedly saw him stealing some boxes on the security footage. Suddenly, a beautiful woman named Debbie runs past them.
Hi, you guys.
Hey.
Craig complains that his sister won't hook him up with Debbie, who is her friend. Smokey mentions that she might be going to a new health club nearby and that Craig should apply for a job there. The two men go to Smokey's house because he can't smoke weed on Craig's porch. However, Smokey's mother tells him to go buy her some cigarettes, so they head to the store where a crazy guy named Izzle causes a ruckus.
Let me wash your car for $2. Hell no. All you gonna do is smoke it up.
The guys return to Craig's house after his mother leaves for work, allowing Smokey to light up a joint there. He persuades Craig to try some, since he's never smoked weed before and he has no job at the moment, but Craig refuses. Suddenly, the neighborhood bully named Debo approaches them, prompting the two to hide their valuables. Debo searches for something to take with no luck, so he tells Smokey to break into Craig's neighbor's house to steal something. They successfully retrieve $200, which Debo takes with him.
You got about $200, huh, D-Bo?
I got about $200.
Then, their neighbor Felicia, who is a drug addict, comes over to borrow Smokey's car, which he obviously refuses. Another neighbor, a teen named Lil Chris, bikes near them and kicks over the house's trash cans. The guys are pissed because Lil Chris keeps kicking over their trash cans, so they chase him to no avail. The two return defeatedly to the porch, and due to the stressful situation, Craig finally agrees to Smokey's offer and smokes some weed. Since it's his first time, Craig feels strange and panics due to his hallucinations.
You want me to go get the sugar or what from my house? Yes.
When they're inside Craig's house, Debbie shows up looking for Dana, but she's not home from school yet. Instead, they tell her to hang out while Smokey calls one of her friends who apparently wants to hook up with him. Debbie sits beside Craig, noticing that he looks high despite him denying it. They talk and play around flirtatiously before the hallucinations freak out Craig once more. After he returns from washing his face, Smokey tells Debbie that Craig likes her. She says that Craig already has a girlfriend before leaving the house, right before Mr. Jones comes in and tells the boys to hang out on the porch. Not long after, Big Worm stops in front of Craig's house on an ice cream truck, demanding that Smokey give the remaining stash of weed. However, since he smoked almost all of it, Smokey says that Craig smoked it all. Big Worm warns him that if he doesn't pay $200 for the weed by 10 this evening, he will kill them both. When informed, Craig panics, but Smokey says that Big Worm won't do anything. Eventually, he agrees to help Smokey get the money. Then, Debbie returns because she left her bag at Craig's house, but when they come out again, Joy is outside. She gets upset at Craig, but he manages to calm her down. Craig wants to borrow the money from Joy, who initially agrees but changes her mind after Debbie's drug addict sister, Felicia, comes up to Craig to borrow something. He returns to Smokey, insisting on the gravity of Big Worm's threat. Feeling bad, Smokey wants to take the consequences and leave Craig out of this mess, but Craig has another plan. He grabs the gun that he just bought from his bedroom, but Mr. Jones caught him doing so. He runs another lecture on how Craig only needs his bare hands to fight, and Craig goes along with it just to get his father to leave him alone. When Craig returns outside, his previous coworker Red is there talking to Smokey. He shows them the black eye that he got from Debo the other day when he asked for his bike back.
Oh, that's cool.
Speaking of the devil, Debo comes up to them and asks Red for some money. Since Red says he's broke, Debo takes his necklace instead and leaves after threatening Smokey. Pissed off by Debo's reign over the neighborhood, Smokey wants to attack him, though neither Craig nor Red wants to join him. Then, a couple of Mexican guys who Smokey had a bad experience with pull up in front of them, wanting to buy some weed. Craig has to force Smokey to sell it to them as they need to pay Big Worm. After Dana comes home and is visited by her friend Shauna, Craig and Smokey nervously plan out their encounter with Big Worm. They wait around until night comes, when Debbie's friend who wants to hook up with Smokey, Rita, shows up. Smokey had invited her to come over earlier through the phone. However, when Smokey approaches her car, he finds out that she is the exact opposite of how she described herself. Instead of looking like Janet Jackson, she is overweight and practically balding. Smokey tries to make an excuse so he can leave her, but it's not working. Meanwhile, inside the house, Craig tries to borrow $200 from Dana, but she outright refuses even though he says his life is on the line. His next target is his mother, who again refuses to lend him any money because he's unemployed, instead telling him to get a job. Outside, Smokey manages to persuade Rita to leave, but she insists on him calling her later.
Bye, Smokey.
He then walks over to Debbie's house to complain that Rita doesn't look like how he imagined, saying that Debbie tricked her. While she tries to vouch for her friend, Smokey notices Red's bike that Debo stole the other day, then asks her why Debo is at her house. Debbie says that he's asleep with Felicia, to his surprise. After saying goodbye to Debbie, Smokey hatches out a plan to sneak into Felicia's room and attempt to take the money that he and Debo stole earlier that day. While Smokey almost successfully takes the money, Izzle suddenly climbs inside the room as well. They start a scene, causing Debo to wake up, but thankfully Smokey and Izzle are no longer there. Smokey returns to Craig's house and tells him about his failed attempt to steal from Debo. Craig wants to go back there and try again, but it's too late as Debo is awake and rides his bike past the two guys. Out of nowhere, Lil Chris appears and scares the two before running away on his bike. They chase him, and this time manage to catch Lil Chris for a moment before the teen runs away again. Craig and Smokey are celebrating their small victory when they notice a black car driving up towards them slowly. They are scared that it's Big Worm planning to do a drive-by shooting, so the two men hide behind some bushes before running back to Craig's house. They return to Craig's room where Smokey receives a call from Big Worm, reminding him to pay his debt that's due in half an hour. They still don't have the money, so they hide out in the room, scared that Big Worm will really kill them. They try to contact Big Worm again once more, 5 minutes before the due time, but Mr. Jones suddenly enters the room. It turns out that Dana had told him about the situation, causing him to shoo Smokey out of the house. Craig walks Smokey out of the house, acting like they're not scared. However, they notice that there's a van stopped in the middle of the road. The two men run as the van starts moving towards them and the men inside start shooting at them. They escape towards the back of the house and climb the roof, and Smokey tries to shoot back with Craig's gun, but of course, he misses. Once the two are out of sight, Big Worm's men hurry to escape the neighborhood while Craig and Smokey hide in the back of a truck. Their neighbors, including Craig's parents, come outside because of the gunshots. Dana is worried about his brother and Smokey's whereabouts, so she asks around but nobody seems to have seen them. Meanwhile, Debbie comes up to Debo and starts to yell at him for beating up her sister, as Debo thought that Felicia was the one who tried to steal his money. Debo hits Debbie, causing Craig, who had just arrived, to confront the big man. Debo pulls out a knife and dares Craig to fight him, so Craig pulls out his gun and aims it at him. While Craig's parents urge him to put down the gun, Debo instead taunts him to use it, even mocking his father. Then, a bang is heard, followed by a recollection of the day's events. It turns out that Craig didn't shoot Debo, instead giving the gun to his father before getting into a barehanded fight with Debo. Craig almost loses after Debo chokes him, but he rises up again and throws a brick and a trash can at Debo, before hitting him once more to knock the man out.
You got knocked the
While Smokey takes the opportunity to steal the $200 from Debo, Debbie thanks Craig for defending her and they agree to hang out the next day. Craig finally breaks up with Joy on the phone, and everything seems to have worked out for him at the time. The movie ends with Smokey calling Big Worm later that night to say that he has the money. Big Worm tries to get him to sell more, but Smokey refuses, saying that he's quitting weed and is going to rehab. However, he makes sure the audience knows that there's no way that he's quitting weed.
I was just bullshitting. And you know this, man.
That's it for today's recap. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.